Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us for the second part of our story. Let's jump right back in. I love you too, Tom said. He leaned in to kiss her, but she turned her head, shocked and humiliated. Tom backed off and walked away, not saying anything until he and Eve were far from the main house. Tom couldn't help but notice the heavily armed security men not far away from them. With Eve's back to him, Tom pulled his phone out and activated the voice record app while observing that he somehow had 2 bars, a weak signal, but enough to make a call, then replaced it in his pocket. It's so beautiful out here, Eve finally said to break the ice. Yeah, Tom replied in a non-committal tone. They reached a wooden park bench overlooking a small pond and stopped. Eve sat down, so Tom followed her lead. What's going on here? He asked. You're a smart man, Tom. Why don't you figure it out? She asked in response. I've got an idea, but it's too horrifying to contemplate, Tom answered. Why don't you just come clean and tell me? All right. As you know, Janice has been picked to be Darren's next executive assistant, Eve began. Yes, I already know that. Janice told me that much. But there's more, isn't there? Yes, there is, Eve said. Your life is about to change, Tom. Whether it's for the better will depend on how you react. You know Janice loves you, don't you? I've heard her say so, but frankly, I'm having a hard time believing it right now. Trust me, she does love you, and she wants the best for the 2 of you. That's why she's willing to do whatever is necessary to guarantee your future. Eve lectured. You do support your wife and her career goals, don't you? Of course. I always have, Tom said. He felt like he had one night years ago, worming his way slowly across the ground, probing the sand for mines under a high-tech heat-dispersing cape. I'm glad to hear you say that. Then you should understand that the next year or 2 will only be a minor blip, a bump in the road of a long, happy marriage. A year or 2. She mentioned 6 months. Why are you saying that? What's going to happen over the next 2 years? Tom asked pointedly. And what exactly is your role in all of this? I'll get to that. My role is to prepare you for what will happen, and to make sure you fully understand and embrace Darren's expectations. For you and your wife. Why should I care about Darren's expectations of me? I don't answer to him and he doesn't sign my paycheck. Tom snarled, his patience growing thin. No, he doesn't, but he does sign hers. And your acquiescence will go a long way toward making Janice's job easier, Eve explained. Acquiescence? What the hell are you talking about? I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male, Eve stated, as though it was as obvious as a giant flashing red neon sign. In other words, he's a self-absorbed, narcissistic a-hole, Tom growled. Eve chuckled at that, the first genuine sound she had made. And the first he believed. Let's just say he expects people to fall in line, do as they're expected. That includes Janice. And by extension, you. In other words, he wants to screw my wife and expect me to just accept it. Isn't that what you're telling me? His temperature rising but, for now, firmly controlled. I wouldn't quite use that terminology, but essentially, yes. In fact, they've already been intimate. Several times, Eve said, noticing the pained look on Tom's face. And you know this how? Tom asked. I was there. I recorded it, Eve said in an even tone, as though recording 2 people having sex was the most natural thing one could do. Would you like to see some of the video? You're kidding, right? Not at all, Tom. Here, take a look. You might find it interesting, Eve said, handing Tom her phone. He looked at the short video clip of Janice and Darren running like animals. It is interesting. Mind if I keep a copy? Tom asked. It would come in handy for his divorce, he thought. Not at all. I saved that clip especially for you. Using the phone's Bluetooth capability, Tom saved a copy to his phone. Tell me something, Tom. How has your love life been lately? Not that it's any of your damn business, but it's been practically non-existent for the last couple of months. Why? Actually, it is my business. The reason is simple. Darren instructed Janice to cut you off most of the time. He's quite possessive of his property. What? And she just went along with it? Tom growled between clenched teeth, his anger growing. Of course. He is her master now. She answers to him just as all of his previous assistants answered to him. And he will expect you to answer to him as well. Tom cringed at the term master. He can expect in one hand and shit in the other. See which one fills up first. Tom snarled through gritted teeth. He saw the smirk on her face and felt like wiping it off with the back of his hand. So what does the a-hole expect from me? Money? Hardly, Eve chuckled. He expects your obedience, your submission, and he will expect you to publicly display that tonight before the other senior partners. What are you talking about? What does he expect me to do? The dynamics of your marriage will change drastically while Janice is in her current position. To reflect that, Darren has documents he needs you to sign. These documents state that you willingly surrender your marriage rights, property, and assets to him while Janice is his assistant. After he has had his way with you, he will expect you to get on your knees in front of him in full view of your wife and the others. And he will expect you to fellate him. To completion, Eve said with a face devoid of emotion. I know it is difficult to hear, but Janice expects it of you as well. She's quite eager to see you do it, in fact. In this way, you will cede any authority of your marriage to him for as long as he deigns to own her. Let me see if I understand what you just said. Your a-hole boss wants me to sign everything to him, let him screw me in the bum, then suck his meat? In front of Janice and the other executives. Are you kidding me? Tom growled, murder in his eyes. I am not kidding, Tom. And yes, that is what he wants. He also expects you to swallow. And so does Janice. Of course, the whole encounter will be captured on video. Of course. That way he can hold it over my head. Sounds like extortion or blackmail to me. You make it sound so tawdry. But it would be used to keep you in line, Eve said nonchalantly. After you have submitted yourself to him, he will take Janice to bed. They will leave for New York City early tomorrow morning, where they will spend the weekend. And where will I be while they play in New York? Tom asked. You will remain here, confined to your room. You will be fed and watched over. When they return, you will drive Janice back to your residence. You will follow her directions to the letter without question, Eve replied. So, if I understand you correctly, I'm to be literally screwed in the butt, made to suck a hole's dick, then kept prisoner here against my will. And what would I get out of this? If you go along with Darren's program, you will be left relatively unscathed, except for some minor humiliation. And when he's finished with Janice, you will be well compensated. And I take it that you, a hole, and my soon-to-be ex-wife conspired to destroy my marriage, take my life's work, and literally screw me in the bum. Am I right? I wouldn't put it quite like that, but I suppose from your point of view, yes. We worked on this together, Eve said in a neutral tone of voice. Did he do this with his other assistants? Tom asked. Yes, Eve said. And they went along with this shit? They did, Eve told him. In fact, the husbands enjoyed it tremendously. What would it hurt? Janice would love to see you pleasure her master. I'm sure she would. They can both kiss my butt and screw off, Tom hissed. And you can tell a hole if he makes a move on me. I'll do everything I can to make sure it'll be the last thing he ever does. I understand you're angry, Tom, and you have every right to be, but you would benefit in the end, in more ways than one. But there's more. More? Tom asked, shocked. The document requires you to obtain a vasectomy at your earliest convenience. And it states that you will accept and take responsibility for any children Janice and Darren produce. In fact, she intends to make a show of flushing her birth control after you sign. And if I don't go along with all of this bullshit, let's just say you wouldn't like the consequences, Eve stated. A few tried to fight Darren and found themselves penniless and convicted sex offenders in prison for illegal videos which just happened to be found on their personal devices. And you may be aware of what happens to sex offenders in prison. Not a pretty existence. That sounds like a threat, Tom responded. Call it what you want. All right, I will, Tom replied as he pulled the phone out of his pocket. He stopped, saved the audio recording, and looked through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. Verifying that he had signal, he selected the number he wanted, then held the phone to his ear. What are you doing? Eve asked, her face turning red with anger. Tom smiled and put a finger to his lips, indicating that she should remain silent. Sheriff Jackson, the man said when he answered Tom's call. "Uncle Bob, how are you doing?" Tom asked. "Stone, what's the word?" "Dad was right. I need an extraction. Fast." "You got the address?" "I got it, son. I also have the coordinates from your phone." "What's your sitrep?" "I counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There's a gate at the entrance. Code is 6973, unless they changed it since last night. Hansen and 3 of his executives are here, along with his trainer. She just gave me the lay of the land, so to speak." "Got it all on audio. I'll send it to you," Tom said. "Copy that," Bob replied. "We're on our way. ETA approximately 5 minutes. Can you hold out that long?" "I think so, Uncle Bob, as long as you're willing to call it self-defense, and thanks." "My pleasure. Wouldn't want to see anything happen to my favorite nephew." "What about Janice?" "According to Hansen's trainer, she's an accomplice and already a bitch for Hansen. So we drop her." "I'm sorry to hear that, son," Bob said sadly. "Yeah, me too." "Well, you hang tough, young man. We'll be there shortly." With that, Tom ended the call, then sent the audio file to his uncle. "What did you just do?" a frightened Eve asked after Tom replaced his phone. "Who did you just call?" "I called in the cavalry," Tom replied with a smile. "I need to get back to the house and warn the others," Eve stammered. Starting to rise, clearly disoriented by the turn of events, Tom shook his head and held her hand and gently pulled her back down on the bench. She stared at his sniper expression in horrified fascination. "I think not. We'll sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes. Might be the last sunshine you ever see," Tom said, allowing himself a satisfied smile. "I think you might have bitten off a little more than you can chew this time, Darren," Ryan said after Janice and the 4 men took their seats next to the large pool behind Darren's house. "Why? Because Janice's cuck is a former Marine?" "Big deal," Darren scoffed. "What's he gonna do? Anyway, he's alone, unarmed, and surrounded by a small platoon of armed security. If he rejects Eve's proposal, then we go to plan B. Just be careful," Rick cautioned. "Don't worry," Darren said. "I've got it all under control. We'll spike his drinks tonight, and when the time comes, he'll be more than happy to suck my bird." "I can't wait to see that," Janice cooed. "Are you going to make him swallow like you did the others?" "Of course," Darren said. "By the time this weekend is over, your little cuck will be begging for my meat," he added, causing Janice to giggle like a schoolgirl. "Just don't push him too hard," Ryan said. "He's not like the others. They were weak." "He's not. They're all the same," Darren sneered. "No, they're not. This guy is a combat Marine trained to kill. You need to be ready for anything." "Settle down, Ryan. I got this," Darren scolded. "But I am curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's service?" he asked Janice. "Well, it's like Tom said. He never told me any details," Janice replied. "All he would say is that he was in the military." "Doesn't matter," Darren snorted. "He's going down. Tonight. And your career will take off." "What if he files for divorce?" Janice asked. "Then I'll ruin him the same way I did the others. He'll end up in prison for sexual assault and other charges or worse." "Don't worry, dear. I'll take care of him." "What's that sound?" Glenn asked, looking around. Everyone stopped talking and listened. The telltale sounds of helicopters could be heard all around them. Suddenly, one of Darren's security men ran to the pool. "We've got a problem, Mr. Hansen," he huffed. "What's that?" Darren asked. They heard shouts and the sounds of men scuffling. Then they saw 2 uniformed deputies in body armor walk to the pool, their rifles ready. "Freeze," one of the deputies ordered. "Drop your weapon," the deputy told Darren's security man, who instantly obeyed, not wanting to get shot. Other deputies poured in, placing Janice, Darren, and the other 3 men in handcuffs. "What's going on?" Darren demanded. "I'll have your badges for this." "Quiet. You're all under arrest," a deputy stated before reading a laundry list of charges. He finished by reading their Miranda rights. The deputies led all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. Officers were everywhere, escorting the handcuffed and disarmed security men to the bus. Janice saw Tom standing next to a large man in a khaki uniform. "Tom, what's going on?" she cried out. Tom and the large man walked toward her. Your little party is over, Janice, Tom said calmly. I'm sorry. I forgot my manners, Janice. This is Sheriff Robert Jackson. You remember my Uncle Bob, don't you? Uncle Bob? Janice gasped weakly. I didn't know you were a sheriff. I guess it slipped my mind, Bob said with a smirk. Tom, please. This is all a big misunderstanding. You have to believe me, Janice cried desperately. No, Janice, I don't have to believe you. In fact, I don't think I've ever been more shocked and disappointed in my whole life. I'll be visiting my attorney ASAP to have divorce papers drawn up. As of now, you're dead to me, Tom said. Do you understand? Dead. With that, Tom grabbed her left hand and pulled her rings off, depositing them in his pocket. You son of a bitch, Darren snarled as he unsuccessfully tried to jerk free of the two deputies holding him. I'll be out of jail in no time, and then I'm going to kill you. You hear me? You piece of shit. That sounds like a threat to me. What do you think, Uncle Bob? Tom asked with a smirk that trumped all of Darren's previous condescension by a wide mark. Sure sounded like one to me as well, Bob said. We'll just add that to all the other charges against him, and it'll help make sure he never gets bail. Don't worry, Mr. Hanson. My boys will take good care of you, he chuckled, and your friends. Get these people out of here, he ordered the deputies, who instantly complied. Tom and Bob watched as the perpetrators were loaded into the bus. Tom felt as if the last several years of his life were a lie. He loved Janice from the moment they met, and Bob slapped him on the shoulder. It'll get better, son. Trust me on that, he said. Bob had been through a divorce from a cheating spouse years ago, and knew the pain Tom felt. Thanks, Uncle Bob, for everything. You're welcome, son. If you need anything, give me a call. And tell your dad I said hello. I think he has a bottle of his best waiting for your visit. I will. Is it safe for me to get my things? I need to get the hell out of here. Sure. I think they're just about finished up inside the place anyway, Bob told him. After they said their goodbyes, Tom packed his things and went home. 1 week later, after commiserating with his father, Tom saw the family attorney and had divorce papers drawn up according to the prenuptial they had signed before the marriage. He waited until they were served before visiting Janice in the county jail. This will be the one and only time I visit you, Janice, he said when she took her seat. I legally need to make sure you got the papers. I got them, Janice said quietly. I've already signed them and sent them back. Good. As I'm sure you could tell, I followed the prenuptial. I'll wait until after your trial to dispose of your things. I appreciate that, Janice said. I don't understand something. How did you know? You'll hear the gory details in court, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I suspected something was happening for a couple of months before that weekend, but I didn't have any proof. About 4 months before that Memorial Day, the estranged husband of one of Darren's so-called assistants approached Dad with a pretty wild story. He also brought some spreadsheets and documents he said his estranged wife got from Darren's system. Dad had me look over the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't say anything to you, privilege and conflict of interest and all that sort of thing. It took some time, but we finally found what we were looking for. Evidence of all kinds of nefarious financial dealings with some rather shady characters. Your lover did an excellent job hiding them, but not good enough. A couple of weeks before that weekend, Dad turned what he had over to the feds, who were more than interested in Hanson's dealings. In fact, they were set to raid your offices sometime in June. Dad said I needed to be very careful that weekend. He relayed what his contact told him, even though he found it very difficult to believe. We spoke with my Uncle Bob, who, as you know, is the county sheriff where Darren's property is located. I had hoped nothing would happen, but that's not how it worked. Eve Carson told me what you and your lover had planned. By the way, I recorded that little conversation. I'm glad we live in a state where only one party's permission is required for a recording like that. I do have a few questions for you, though. What do you want to know? Janice asked. How long before that weekend were you screwing your so-called master? About 2 months, Janice replied. Tom was surprised that she was so candid. That's about the time things fell off with us. Did he tell you to cut me off? Yes, she said quietly, her face turning red. I suppose I should get tested for STIs then, Tom said, causing Janice even more embarrassment. Did you really want to see me? Suck your lover off? Janice looked down, refusing to meet her husband's gaze. Well, he pressed angrily. She looked back up at him with tears in her eyes. Again, yes, she said. Surely you knew I would never willingly agree to do that. I would rather die first. So why? Because I was so smitten with Darren that I would have gone along with anything he wanted. You don't understand. He liked the feeling of having power over everyone around him. And if I didn't comply, he had what he called a plan B, Janice admitted. You mean the drugs? Yes, they found the vial with the chemical he intended to use on me. I had nothing to do with that, Janice claimed. That's interesting, because they found your prints all over the vial, Tom said, causing Janice to look at him with shock. Which tells me you were part of his plot against me. No, I never wanted to hurt you, she sobbed. The evidence says otherwise, Janice. You not only cheated on me, you plotted and schemed with your so-called master to destroy me as a man. So there's no way back? Nope, none for you. No forgiveness, nothing. Like I told you that day, you are dead to me, bitch. Tom hissed as Janice shed hot tears but didn't flinch. I've wasted enough time on you. Goodbye, Janice. Enjoy what's left of your miserable life. Before I go, bitch, I need to let you know that there are some friends I have in prison who are waiting to meet you. It will be fun. With that, he stood and walked away, immune to her tears. After several court appearances, Janice, Darren, Eve, and the others were found guilty of all the charges leveled against them. As the ringmaster, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, meaning he would never be paroled. Having played a minor role in Darren's illegal financial schemes, the 3 executives were sentenced to 20 years. For their parts in Darren's schemes, Eve and Janice were given somewhat lighter sentences. Several others in the firm were charged for their roles in the conspiracy. A few turned state's evidence against Darren and were given immunity as part of a plea deal. By the time the smoke cleared, the Remington Law Group no longer existed. Tom's divorce from Janice went through quickly and without a hitch. Due to Janice's prison sentence, Tom boxed up all of her possessions and placed them in storage for her parents to collect at their convenience. On July 4th, Tom, his father, and Bob celebrated Independence Day, as did the rest of the nation, with a barbecue and fireworks. Bob brought a guest to the festivities and introduced her to Tom. He was instantly taken by the attractive, shapely, brown-eyed brunette in front of him and had a difficult time not staring at her well-toned legs, set off by a pair of short denim cutoffs. Son, this is Marcia Simmons. She just moved here from Dallas and started up with me a couple weeks ago. You're a deputy? Tom asked. Sure am, Marcia said with a confident smile that lit her face. She's also a former Marine, Bob said. An MP like your dad. Marcia, my nephew here, was also in the Corps. A sniper with Force Recon. Semper Fi, Marcia said. Ora, Tom replied. I think we're gonna get along just fine. Tom gushed with a huge grin. I think so too, Marcia agreed. Buy a girl a beer? Sure, Tom replied. I could use a fresh one myself. He grabbed 2 beers from his father's ice chest and handed one to her. Your uncle told me about your last op. Sounds perfectly executed, Marcia said when they sat down. I'm sorry about what you went through with your ex. Yeah, well, I guess it happens, Tom remarked quietly. The divorce will be final soon. How about you? I saw the mark on your ring finger. Were you married as well? I was, Marcia said. Apparently my husband wasn't, if you know what I mean. I came home early one night and found him in bed with his secretary. In my bed, no less. I'm sorry to hear that. If you ask me, he was an idiot and a fool. Tom told her as he took in her figure. I agree, Marcia said. I'm just glad we didn't have any children. Do you have kids? No, thankfully. We were talking about starting a family. Then things went to hell in a handbasket. Tom and Marcia talked for much of the evening and had a blast when Bob and Tom's father set off the fireworks. By the time the evening was over, Tom felt much better. At the very least, he believed he had met a kindred spirit in Marcia. Are you about ready to head back, Marcia? Bob asked after they finished the fireworks display. I guess it is about that time, she remarked before turning to Tom. I had a wonderful time, Tom. It was a real pleasure meeting you. I had a wonderful time as well, Marcia, and I'm very glad I got to meet you. In fact, I'd like to see you again if that's all right. That would be more than all right, Tom, she said, a broad smile on her face. Here's my number, she added, handing him a card with her cell number. Your uncle keeps me busy, but I'm usually off Saturday nights. Give me a call. Will do, Tom said, returning her smile. He took her card, observing the wink and smile from his uncle. I'll call you this Thursday. Talk to you then, Marcia said before kissing his cheek. They said their goodbyes and left. Nice-looking young lady, Tom's father said after they left. Yes, very nice, Tom said with a massive grin. I hope you intend to keep your promise to her, the older man said. Absolutely, Tom said. Good man, his father said, slapping Tom on the back. Come on, help me clean up, and let's see if we can polish off the rest of that beer. You gonna give me the day off tomorrow to sleep it off? Tom asked. Hell no, his father replied with a laugh. Laughing in return, Tom joined his father, his mind on a sweet brunette with the sexiest legs he had seen in quite some time. Waterloo, where will you meet your Waterloo? Every puppy has his day. Everybody has to pay. Everybody has to meet his Waterloo. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories like this. See you next time. Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Tom or Stone, to his friends and family, looked forward to the upcoming weekend as he drove home that afternoon from work. Monday was Memorial Day, but he and Janice, his wife of 5 years, had been invited to spend a 4-day weekend at the country estate of her boss, Darren Hansen, a senior partner with the Remington Law Group, where Janice worked as a paralegal. Stone already had Monday off, so he took a vacation day to cover Friday. His boss, who also happened to be his father, was kind enough to let him go early on Thursday so he could get packed and hit the road. The drive to Darren's estate would easily take 3 hours, given freeway traffic and the nature of the narrow winding roads leading to Darren's estate. He had high hopes for the weekend. Things had been a little rough with Janice over the last 2 months. She had become somewhat moody, snapping at him for no apparent reason. And sex? Forget that. What had been a 3 or 4 night a week enthusiastic thing had dropped off to maybe a grudging once every other week get it over with exercise, if that. Being the concerned, loving husband, Stone reached out to Janice, hoping to help her overcome whatever bothered her. But she would simply shrug him off, telling him she would deal with it herself. Worse yet, Janice constantly rebuffed his efforts to initiate sex or any physical contact and now frequently recoiled from him when he tried to hold her in his arms or comfort her. The situation was becoming increasingly unbearable for him, and he wondered if she was having an affair. Then she told him they had been invited to her boss' country estate for the weekend to celebrate her promotion. Promotion? Tom asked, confused. You never said anything about a promotion. How long has this been in the works? A couple of months now, Janice told him. I'm sorry, I should have told you before. Is that why you've been so short with me lately? I guess so. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to be such a bitch to you. I've had a lot on my mind lately, she replied contritely. Tom smiled as he wrapped her in his arms and felt saddened when she flinched slightly. I can imagine, he said. And to think I was worried that you might be having an affair. He felt her stiffen up slightly, but then she relaxed. Of course not, Janice said. I would never do something like that to you. He heard the words, but something in her tone didn't sound convincing. I'm glad to hear that. Tom forced himself to respond through his growing uneasiness. 'Cause you know that's the one thing I simply wouldn't tolerate. I know, Janice said quietly. So, do you think you can get off the Friday before? 4 days in the country would do us both a lot of good. Sure. I have plenty of vacation time. We can leave Thursday after I get off work if you want. That would be wonderful. I'll let Darren know and have everything packed by the time you get home, she said. Promise. It will be a weekend you'll never forget. Stone thought about those words as he filled the gas tank on his new Ford F-150 wheel drive pickup. A weekend he would never forget? He could only hope she meant that in a good way, but a part of him had mixed feelings, especially after the rather serious discussion he had with his father and uncle earlier. He pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and headed into the house. True to her word, Janice had everything packed and ready to be loaded into the truck. He checked his bags, verifying that his stuff was packed and ready to go. He was impressed that Janice had even packed his toiletries in his overnight bag. Then he took in the other bags. "You have enough stuff here for a week," he joked when she came into the room wearing cutoffs and a t-shirt. "I thought we were just going to the country for the weekend. You know I like to prepare for anything," she joked. "Why don't you get that stuff loaded up and I'll finish up here?" He saw that she had sandwich stuff on the counter and was packing a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the ride out, as she used to do when they took day trips over the weekend. "Sounds good," he said with a smile. Maybe this would be a good weekend after all, he thought. He loaded everything into the truck, helped Janice finish packing the food, locked the house, and set off for what he ardently hoped would be a good weekend in the country. "This weekend is going to be the best ever," Janice gushed as Tom drove. "Trust me, you'll have a great time." "I'm looking forward to that," Tom replied, hoping she meant it. It took longer than Tom planned to get out of the city, thanks to an accident on the freeway that brought traffic to a screeching halt. As a result, they were running almost 2 hours behind schedule. But that didn't affect Janice's buoyant good mood, which pleased Tom. He filled the gas tank up once more when he reached the road that would take them to Darren's estate, then followed the windy road through the hilly wooded terrain. It was well after dark when they reached the gate leading to Darren's sizable 2-story home. Janice had been given the code for the gate, and soon they pulled up to the sprawling brick mansion. "Damn, this is one hell of a biggest house," Tom exclaimed. 3 men in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck as Tom turned the engine off. Tom wondered, why would they need sunglasses in the dark? "I can get our luggage," Tom said as he opened the back door of the pickup. "Thanks anyway." "No, sir, that's our job," one of the men said in a voice that held no humor. Another man held his hand out. "Keys, sir?" "I need to park your vehicle," the other man said. "Please do as they ask, sweetheart," Janice suggested in a tone that made it clear he should obey these men. He looked at the man asking for the keys and saw the telltale bulge in his jacket that indicated he was armed. "Sure," Tom said darkly, handing his keys to the second man as the other 2 men grabbed their luggage unceremoniously and stalked off into the gloom without a word. "Thank you," the man said mechanically. Tom watched as the men easily carried the heavy bags up the steps. "Are you coming?" Janice asked. "Yeah, sure. On my way." Tom followed Janice and the 2 men up the stairs, wondering why they would need to be armed. Something about this just didn't seem right. "Ah, there you are. I trust you had a safe trip." A tall man with dark curly hair boomed when they entered. Tom recognized the man as Darren Hansen. He had met Darren a few times at company holiday events. As Tom watched, Janice and the man exchanged hugs. Then he turned to Tom. "Thomas, it's good to meet you again." "I'm Darren Hansen," he announced, extending a hand. "Welcome to my humble abode." "Thank you. A pleasure meeting you again, Mr. Hansen," Tom said, accepting Darren's hand. "No need to be so formal, Tom. May I call you Tom? I have a feeling we'll be seeing a lot more of each other," Darren said with a slight smile, "especially now that your wife is moving up in the firm." "Of course," Tom said. "I'm sorry we're running late. There was an accident on the freeway," Janice explained. "So I heard," Darren said. "I am gratified you made it safely. Are the others here?" Janice asked. "Others?" Tom wasn't aware others would be here. "Yes, they're all here. Unfortunately, they decided to turn in for the evening. Wanted to get well rested before the festivities begin tomorrow," Darren replied. The man who took Tom's keys returned through the front door, handing the keys back to Tom. "Thank you," Tom said, putting the keys in his pocket. By now, the 2 men who took their luggage had returned from the second floor. "Harold, escort the Jacksons to their room if you would," Darren commanded. "Yes, sir," one of the big men said. "We'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning," Darren said. "Sleep well." "Thank you," Janice said quietly, her eyes downcast demurely. Tom noticed but didn't say anything. He simply filed it in the back of his mind. Maybe Dad was right, he thought. "This way, please," Harold commanded in a dead, gravelly voice. Tom and Janice followed the man up the spiral staircase and down 2 hallways before stopping at a locked door. He pulled out a card key and held it before a reader, and Tom heard the door lock open. Harold opened the door and motioned for them to enter the room. "Oh my," Janice gasped when they walked inside. The room was spacious and well-appointed. It even had its own bathroom with a double vanity and a large television monitor on the wall opposite the king-sized bed. A gas fireplace took up most of one wall. "This is very nice," Tom said with forced cheerfulness as he looked around. "I'm glad you approve," Harold said. He pulled out 2 card keys, one of which he handed to Janice and the other to Tom. "These are your keys to the room. Keep them with you at all times, please. Breakfast will be served at 7:30 tomorrow morning. Good night." "Good night," Janice replied as Harold left the room, closing the door. "This is a very nice room," Tom said as he walked around, taking inventory of the room. "Yes, it is," Janice agreed as Tom began hanging his clothes in the closet. Janice put her things away, but Tom noticed she simply hung her garment bag in the closet, not taking her clothes out first. "So who are these other people Darren said would be here?" he asked. "Oh, just some bigwigs from the firm," Janice replied, not looking at him. "And this new position, what is it, exactly?" Tom followed up. "I'm Darren's new executive assistant," Janice told him. "The position comes with a healthy increase in pay, but I will have to travel from time to time. Are you okay with that?" "As long as it doesn't interfere with our lives," Tom said. "We've talked about starting a family, you know?" "I know, but I may have to put that off for a while," Janice quietly said, "at least until I get established in my new position." "What time frame are you talking about?" Tom asked. "I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a little longer. Are you okay with that?" she asked. "I know this job is very important to you." Tom replied neutrally, wondering what, exactly, this position entailed, and knowing that they weren't getting any younger. "You have no idea," Janice told him. "This is a huge step for me. All I'm asking is for some time and a little patience." "Fair enough," Tom said, taking his wife in his arms. "You know I'm very proud of you, don't you?" "Really?" Janice asked in a small voice. "Of course," he responded, kissing her face. "I love you, Janice. Don't ever forget it." "I love you too, Stone," she replied. After they climbed into the bed and turned out the lights, Tom reached for Janice, but her eyes were closed and she appeared asleep. He sighed, as this had been her pattern for the last 2 months. He turned on his side and fell asleep, frustrated. The sky was a clear, deep blue, with not so much as the hint of a cloud. The sun was high, and a slight breeze blew from the south. Suddenly, the sky grew dark and filled up with large, menacing clouds. The slight breeze became a brisk wind that grew in intensity with each passing moment. A deep rumble could be heard as the sky grew darker and the clouds gathered. A brief flash of lightning could be seen in the distance as the storm clouds grew and the wind intensified. A sudden flash of lightning struck the ground close to his feet. When he looked down, he saw a beating heart pumping blood onto the ground. Tom had seen this dream many times except for the beating heart, and each time he experienced it, someone he knew died within the following 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was hit by a drunk driver and killed instantly. A year before that, his mother suffered a stroke just 12 hours after his dream, and she died 24 hours later, never regaining consciousness. Tom sat up in bed, sweat pouring off his body. He looked at the digital clock on his nightstand and saw it was 4:15 a.m. Although it was extremely early morning, Tom knew he had to contact his father. Grabbing his phone from the nightstand, Tom noticed he had no service. He got out of bed carefully so as not to awaken Janice, donned his trousers and a t-shirt, then slipped on his shoes. Grabbing his card key, he opened the door to see one of Darren's armed security men at a small desk in the hallway. The man in the dark suit and glasses looked up when Tom opened the door. "Is there a problem, Mr. Jackson?" the large man asked. "I need to use a phone, and there's no cell service here," Tom said. "Who do you intend to call?" "I need to call my father. It's important," Tom told him. "This way, sir," the man said as he stood. Tom followed him to a smaller room off the hallway. "You can use that phone?" he added, pointing to a phone on a small table beside a chair. "Just dial 9 for an outside line first." Thank you, Tom said as he sat in the chair. He began dialing his father's number and saw the man standing in the doorway. Can I have some privacy, please? Of course, the guard said, turning from the door. Tom couldn't believe the nerve of the man. And why was he armed? He finished dialing the number and waited. His father answered after the third ring. Hello. Who is this? His father asked. Tom could tell the older man had just been woke up. Hi, Dad. It's me, Tom. Sorry for calling so early in the morning. I just wanted to make sure you were all right. I was in the middle of a very nice dream, remembering your mother. But I'm okay, Tom. Did you have another one of your dreams? Yeah, Tom said quietly. He could hear the other man sigh at the other end. Same as you had before Andy's accident? His father asked. Exactly the same, Tom said. I see. Thanks for letting me know, son. I'm doing okay, but I'll keep a sharp eye out. Why don't you get back to sleep? Okay. I will, Dad. I just wanted to let you know, Tom told him. I appreciate that, son. I'm fine though. Promise. You're stuck with me for a while yet, his father promised. Remember what I said and watch your back. They ended the call and Tom walked back to his room. Everything okay? The guard asked. Yeah, everything is fine. Thanks, Tom said before opening the door to his room. He undressed and climbed back into the bed, and Janice groaned as she rolled over to face him. Where did you go? Is everything okay? She asked groggily. Yes, everything is just fine. I had to call Dad, Tom said. Oh, she groaned before rolling back onto her side. From her breathing, Tom could tell she had gone back to sleep. He closed his eyes, but sleep eluded him for another hour as he kept thinking about the disturbing dream. Tom rolled out of bed at 6 a.m. and went to the bathroom to do his morning routine. Afterward, he took a quick shower, then changed into a clean pair of jeans and a polo shirt. Janice followed him into the bathroom after opening the blinds. Standing at the nightstand, Tom gathered his watch and wallet and looked out the window. He noticed the wrought iron bars attached to the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no landing, and the concrete pad of the driveway had to be at least 25 feet down. Looking outside, Tom saw a helicopter sitting on a pad at least 50 yards from the house. He hadn't seen it before, but it was dark when they arrived the previous night. He also noticed guards carrying what looked like AR-style rifles slung over their shoulders. Tom couldn't help but wonder, was Darren expecting trouble? Are you ready for breakfast, sweetheart? Janice asked when she came out of the bathroom. Ready as I'll ever be, Tom said as he snapped his wristwatch. What happened last night? She asked. Another dream, Tom said. You mean, like before your brother was killed? Yeah, exactly the same. I called Dad to make sure he was okay. How is he? She asked. Fine. I caught him in the middle of a dream. I'll bet. Janice snickered in a way he found vaguely disturbing as she finished dressing. Come on. Let's go downstairs and get some breakfast. I'm famished. Don't forget your walking stick, she reminded Tom. The walking stick was a present from his father, given to Tom after he was discharged from the hospital years earlier. During his service in Iraq, the Humvee he was in got hit by an enemy RPG. 2 other Marines in the vehicle were killed instantly, while Tom and another Marine escaped. Although severely wounded, the 2 Marines managed to take cover and defend themselves until help arrived. Tom spent months in surgery and rehab and was eventually given a medical discharge. Fortunately, the doctors saved Tom's leg but had to replace his left hip. The rehab helped Tom learn to walk again, and the walking stick helped considerably. Although he could get around fine now, he still experienced pain after extensive walking, so he continued to use his father's gift. They arrived at Darren's table to find 3 other men and a woman waiting for them. Tom had briefly met the men before and knew they were executives with Darren's law firm, although he couldn't remember their names. He had never seen nor met the woman before. Everyone, I'd like to introduce my husband, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, Janice announced. Tom shook hands with the others. Stonewall, huh? That's a rather unusual name, observed Glenn Oldman, one of the firm's executives. My parents were big on the Grand Ole Opry back in the day, So they named me after a favorite country and western singer from the 50s and 60s, Tom replied. Dad used to joke it was either that or Michael. Stonewall Jackson. Yeah, I seem to recall that name, Glenn replied with a smile. He died about 10 years ago, didn't he? That's what I heard, Tom replied. The woman smiled as Tom accepted her hand. It's good to finally meet you, Mr. Jackson. I've heard a lot about you. I'm Eve Carson, she said. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Carson. Please call me Tom. I hope you've heard at least a few good things. So, what do you do for the firm? I'm in charge of training and recruiting, and please, feel free to call me Eve. I have heard a lot of good things, and I have a feeling we'll be spending a lot of time together this weekend. Oh, Tom asked. Why is that? With Janice's new position, there's going to be a lot of changes in your life, Darren stated before Eve could respond. She's here to help you adjust. Adjust? And why would I need to adjust to my wife's promotion? Tom asked, more than a little concerned. He looked at Janice for an explanation, but none was forthcoming. It's complicated, Darren stated bluntly. Let's eat breakfast first, shall we? Maybe we can get to know each other a little before we get into the meat of things. They sat down as Darren's employees wheeled carts into the room. As Tom watched, they placed dishes in front of everyone piled with eggs, bacon, toast, and fruit. Another employee walked around the table, pouring coffee into their cups. Tom also took stock of the armed security men who took stations on either side of the door. So, Tom, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Rick Harmon, another executive, asked. Janice says you were some kind of soldier or something. Tom glanced at Janice before answering. He had told her a little about his service, but it went over her head. As far as she was concerned, everyone who wore a green uniform was in the army. I was in the military, but I was never a soldier, Tom replied before taking a bite of his scrambled eggs, which he found delicious. Oh, what were you then? Rick asked, glancing at Janice. I was in the Marines, Tom answered. Thank you for your service, Darren said. What did you do in the Marines, if you don't mind my asking? Not at all, Tom said. I was a scout sniper, assigned to a force reconnaissance unit when I was wounded. Scout sniper. Huh. Mused Ryan Jones, the third executive at the table. So, basically, you killed pigs, right? Tom saw the glances between the other executives and the security men before replying. I suppose that's one way of putting it, Tom said. The glances became expressions of concern, and Tom wondered what was happening here. 32 enemy soldiers didn't finish their missions, he added lightly, but in a tone like a rattlesnake giving fair warning. I haven't had to kill anyone in several years, though. The military part of his mind chided himself. Had he betrayed his position, or warned them off? Interesting you never told us this, Janice, Darren said with a slight tightness in his voice. Looking at Tom's wife, who flushed slightly. It's not Janice's fault, Tom said before Janice could speak. I never told her exactly what I did in the service, partly because some of it is still classified, and partly because that's a period of my life I'd much rather forget. But now you're an accountant, is that right? Rick asked hurriedly, breaking in to divert the tension that had suddenly rolled over the table like an overcast day. Yes. I was discharged after my rehab and went to college to finish my business degree. That's where I met Janice. I'm now a forensic accountant working for my father, Tom said. What does your father do? Glenn asked. He runs Jackson Specialty Investigations. Works primarily for corporations, Tom said. I've heard of them, Rick said thoughtfully. They do good work from what I've heard. They finished their breakfast, engaging mostly in small talk. But that didn't help Tom, who had a very uncomfortable feeling about all of this. He had learned to pay close attention to his instincts on the battlefield, as they had kept him alive more than once. Well, it looks like a beautiful day outside. Eve, why don't you take Tom for a tour around the property while we go out back? Darren asked. Of course, Eve replied. Tom looked at Janice and tried to gauge her thoughts but couldn't. She had an expression he would hate to play poker against. Go ahead, sweetheart. It'll be okay, she said encouragingly, but a little stiffly. Yeah, okay, Tom said, He was uncomfortable with the situation but felt he couldn't do much now. So he acquiesced to Darren and Janice. Intel and Recon. Recon and Intel, he told himself. Grabbing his walking stick, he looked at Eve. Are you ready, Tom? She asked with a brightness he knew was phony. Sure, Tom replied, hoping the churning in his gut would settle down. After you. Janice put a hand on his arm before he left, and he stopped and looked at her. Just remember that I love you, she whispered. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.